I slammed the front door shut, fighting back tears of fury. The sharp clatter reverberated through the eerily silent home, but the sting of betrayal drowned out all other sounds. My heart raced as the image burned into my mind. Rhett, my husband of 7 years, tangled on our living room couch with a barely dressed woman half my age. "Delaney, it's not what it looks like," Rhett called out, hastily pulling up his pants. The strange woman scrambled for her discarded clothes, her face flushed with shame. "Oh, really?" I spat back, my hands trembling. "Because it looks like you were screwing some vapid homewrecker on the couch we picked out together." Rhett sighed dramatically, as if my outrage was an overreaction. "Don't be so dramatic, Del. Tessa and I just got a little carried away, that's all." My jaw dropped at his casual dismissal. Tessa? He knew her name? How long had this sordid affair been going on behind my back? "You lying, cheating bastard!" I screamed, hurling a crystal vase towards him. It shattered against the wall, shards raining down like deadly confetti. Rhett flinched but remained infuriatingly calm. "Calm down, Delaney. You're overreacting as usual." That patronizing tone, the one that made me feel small and irrational, was the final straw. I wanted to slap that smug expression right off his face, but I couldn't give him the satisfaction. Not this time. "Don't worry, Rhett," I said, my voice low and controlled. "I'm leaving, and when I do, you'll wish I had overreacted." Grabbing my purse, I stormed out, slamming the door once more for good measure. Hot tears streamed down my cheeks as I climbed into my car. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of rage, fueling a burning desire for vengeance. Rhett thought he could discard me, treat me like a hysterical nuisance after years of being the perfect, devoted wife. He was gravely mistaken. I would expose his lies and betrayal for the whole world to see, and he would pay dearly for underestimating me. As I peeled out of the driveway, I made a silent vow. Rhett Lancaster's world was about to come crashing down, and I would be the one holding the wrecking ball. Rage simmered within me during the sleepless night at my friend Karen's place. How could Rhett's betrayal have escaped my notice for so long? The signs were there. His frequent late nights at the office, the sly glances at his phone, his emotional distance. I had chalked it up to work stress, naively believing his flimsy excuses. The following morning, as I picked at a stale bagel, memories from our early years together resurfaced. I reminisced about the time we'd met at a company party. Rhett was a rising executive, and I was an ambitious financial consultant. His charming wit and dazzling smile had instantly captivated me. We'd fallen hard and fast, marrying within a year amid heartfelt vows of eternal devotion. Those first few years were blissful. Rhett would surprise me with romantic gestures, home-cooked meals after grueling workdays, spontaneous weekend getaways, adoring glances that set my heart aflutter. We were the couple others envied, deliriously in love and constantly affectionate. Yet, as his career skyrocketed, the cracks began to show. He grew distant, more preoccupied with networking events than date nights. Our once passionate intimacy dwindled to an infrequent formality. I'd brushed it off, convincing myself it was just a phase, that the man I loved was still there beneath the ambition-fueled workaholism. How painfully wrong I was. Rhett's affair with that insipid Tessa was likely the culmination of years of unfaithfulness. The thought made my blood boil. Had he been deceiving me from the start? Using me as a trophy wife to bolster his successful image? "You okay, Del?" Karen's concerned voice pulled me back to the present. I shook my head, swallowing the lump in my throat. I knew our marriage was struggling, but I never imagined he'd stoop so low. I was such a fool. Karen squeezed my hand sympathetically. "Don't beat yourself up. That bastard is to blame, not you. But now you know the truth. He's the one who'll be sorry." Her words ignited a renewed sense of determination within me. Karen was right. I may have been blindsided, but the power was now in my hands. If Rhett wanted to play the unfaithful cad, he would face the consequences of his reprehensible actions. I would uncover every sordid detail of his philandering ways, every underhanded financial dealing he'd tried to hide. Once I dismantled his life, one meticulously collected piece of evidence at a time, he would have no choice but to submit to my demands. Justice and restitution would be mine. Rhett's carefree days of deception were over. The shadow of his betrayal now loomed over him, and I would be its merciless cast. Over the next few days, I felt a renewed sense of clarity and purpose. The shock of Rhett's betrayal had dissipated. It's replaced by an icy resolve to expose his deceitful ways. I started by gathering any shred of evidence that could undermine his lies: credit card statements, phone records, even his computer browsing history. Then came the call that solidified my path to vengeance. "Mrs. Lancaster?" The voice on the other end belonged to Nina Garland, the private investigator I had hired. "I have the report you requested." My heart raced as I listened to her findings: surveillance records of Rhett's frequent rendezvous with Tessa at seedy motels, documentation of his hidden offshore accounts, even video evidence of his indiscretions. It was a damning collection that left no doubt of his reprehensible behavior. "This should be more than enough to bury that bastard," Nina stated matter-of-factly. "Let me know how you want to proceed from here." I took a deep, steadying breath. "Don't worry, I have a plan." Over the following week, I meticulously prepared my strategy. I secured copies of all our joint financial assets and accounts, documenting every cent Rhett had funneled into his selfish ventures. I also gathered ironclad proof of his emotional and financial betrayal to present to my lawyer. When I finally met with Elliot Vance, the high-powered attorney Karen had recommended, he whistled as he reviewed the extensive evidence I had compiled. "Damn, Delaney," he muttered, shaking his head. "Your husband hasn't left you many options other than complete obliteration." A grim smile crossed my lips. "That's exactly what I intend. I want everything. Full custody of our assets, his professional reputation dragged through the mud, the whole catastrophic truth exposed." Elliot raised an eyebrow, but didn't argue. "With what you've gathered here, we can crucify him in court. He won't know what hit him." My smile widened, fueled by the thought of Rhett's world crumbling around him. Good. It's long overdue that he faces the consequences of his selfish actions. As I left Elliot's office, I felt an overwhelming sense of validation coursing through me. For too long, I had been the oblivious victim, enabling Rhett's misdeeds through my blind trust. No more. The scales had tipped, and I was poised to deliver the ultimate act of karmic retribution. Let the fallout begin. With Elliot's guidance, my path to retribution became crystal clear. We would hit Rhett with an overwhelming barrage of legal actions: a civil suit for emotional damages from his affairs, a motion to freeze all our joint assets until the divorce proceedings, and the looming threat of exposing his indiscretions to his employers. "The key is to leave him no room to breathe," Elliot explained as we pored over the meticulously organized evidence. "We bury him in so many legal challenges that he has no choice but to concede to our terms." I nodded, my jaw set with grim determination. "I don't care what it costs. I want him to lose everything. His reputation, his job, his sense of smug superiority, all of it has to go." Elliot smirked. "With what we have here, he won't be able to slither his way out, not unless he wants the entire sordid affair plastered all over the news." The thought of Rhett's carefully cultivated image being dragged through the mud filled me with vindictive satisfaction. Let him suffer the same public humiliation he had forced upon me. Over the next few weeks, the legal onslaught commenced. Summonses and affidavits flooded Rhett's office and home, each one another tightening vice in my web of revenge. I could envision his arrogant composure cracking with each new blow. Then came the phone call that confirmed my efforts were taking their toll. "Delaney?" Rhett's voice was uncharacteristically meek. "What is all this about? These lawsuits, the accusations? It's insane." I let out a hollow laugh. "Insane? No, Rhett, this is consequence. I warned you that you'd regret betraying me." There was a pause, and I could practically hear his eyes narrowing in denial. "You're still hung up on that?" "I already apologized for the thing with Tessa. She didn't mean anything to me." White-hot fury engulfed me at his callous dismissal. "Save your pathetic excuses. This goes far beyond your tawdry fling with that woman. You've been lying, cheating, and stealing from me for years, and now you're going to pay the price." "What are you talking about?" he blustered, a hint of fear creeping into his voice. "You've gone too far with these crazy legal actions. We can work this out like adults, without all the dramatics." I shook my head, undeterred by his feeble pleas. "Too late for that. You had your chance to come clean and do the right thing, but you decided to treat me like a fool instead. Well, the joke's on you now." With a cold sense of finality, I stated, "Enjoy your last few weeks of stability, Rhett. Because once I'm through with you, you'll be left with nothing but the ashes of the life you destroyed." The line went dead as a deafening silence enveloped me. Finally, I allowed myself a grim smile. Revenge would be mine. The night for the final strike had arrived. Per my instructions, Elliot had arranged for me to, coincidentally, cross paths with Rhett at the upscale restaurant where he frequently wined and dined his mistresses on the company dime. As I entered, my eyes immediately locked onto his familiar form at a corner table, and sure enough, the insipid Tessa was perched beside him, giggling vapidly at whatever drivel he was spewing. But they weren't alone. Several of Rhett's colleagues from the office were also present, along with what appeared to be a few of Tessa's friends. Perfect. An audience to witness his downfall. I straightened my shoulders and strode over, every ounce of pent-up anger propelling me forward. Rhett noticed my approach, and his brows furrowed in confusion. "Delaney? What are you doing here?" His voice held an edge of apprehension. Rather than answering, I turned to address the group. "Good evening, everyone. I'm sure you're all quite familiar with my husband, Rhett Lancaster, by now." I let the statement linger, allowing the weight of its implications to sink in. A few uneasy glances were exchanged before I continued. "For those of you who aren't aware, Rhett has been engaging in a long-term affair with this woman." I gestured towards Tessa, who had gone pale, while simultaneously deceiving me about our finances and embezzling funds for his own selfish indulgences. A collective gasp rippled through the group as I confirmed what Rhett had clearly tried to conceal from his professional circle. His own face had drained of color. "Delaney, please," he started, but I cut him off with a withering glare. "Don't bother with your sniveling excuses, Rhett. The evidence has already been provided to your employers, who are currently investigating you for gross misconduct and misappropriation of company assets." One of his colleagues, a stern-faced woman I vaguely recognized, spoke up. "Is this true, Rhett? Have you been abusing the company's trust like this?" Before he could respond, I smoothly interjected. "I have financial records, explicit videos, even eyewitness accounts, thoroughly documenting his repeated infidelities over the past 3 years." I turned to address a shocked-looking Tessa. "You should know he's been seeing other women behind your back, too, keeping a whole stable of mistresses on the side to enjoy his endless appetite for self-gratification." Tessa's face crumpled in devastated disbelief as the murmurs grew louder around the table. Reveling in Rhett's impotent silence, I took immense satisfaction in ripping away every last facade he had constructed. "So you see, while my husband has been putting on this upstanding, successful charade in the office, he's been harboring a deep well of depravity behind closed doors, lying, cheating, stealing." I paused to meet his pathetic gaze steadily. Absolutely no integrity or remorse whatsoever. The damning words hung heavy in the air, condemnation rendering the entire group silent. Rhett could only stare back at me, his expression an inscrutable mask of shock and hatred. My smile was one of pure, merciless triumph. Revenge, as they say, is best served cold, and I had ensured his helping was utterly, deliciously brutal. The aftermath of my explosive revelation at the restaurant was more satisfying than I could have imagined. Within days, the fallout from Rhett's exposed misdeeds began raining down in spectacular fashion. First came the professional consequences. Rhett's colleagues, utterly appalled by his deceitful conduct, wasted no time reporting the matter to the company's ethics board. An internal investigation was swiftly launched, and within a week he was summarily dismissed. His once prestigious position as a high-ranking executive now stripped away in utter disgrace. But I wasn't done there. Thanks to the airtight documentation Elliot had prepared, the court swiftly approved a motion to freeze all of Rhett's assets and accounts until the divorce proceedings could be finalized. His desperate pleas for lenience fell on deaf ears as the full scope of his financial treachery came to light. "You reap what you sow, Rhett," I stated coolly when he confronted me, eyes blazing with impotent rage. "You thought you could drain our marital assets to fund your tawdry affairs? Well, now you get to start over, with nothing." His jaw clenched, but he knew better than to argue. The evidence was undeniable, and any attempt to refute it would only make his situation more precarious. As the legal web tightened around him, something peculiar happened. Tessa resurfaced, but this time she was on my side. Turns out the scales had fallen from her eyes as well once she realized the depth of Rhett's depravity. "He used me," she admitted shamefacedly when I agreed to meet with her. Her voice was small, a stark contrast from the smug, vapid demeanor she'd exuded that fateful day. "Lied to me about being separated, made me think I was the only one." I regarded her coolly, unmoved by her attempts to garner sympathy. "And you were stupid enough to believe him, despite how he was treating his own wife?" She flinched, but didn't argue. "I know, I have no excuse. But please, Delaney, let me make it right. I'll testify, give you whatever evidence you need about his affairs, anything to take that bastard down after what he did to us both." I considered her offer, something cynical twisting inside me at her utterly pathetic display, just like Rhett, using people for her own selfish interests, blind to the consequences of her actions. But this time, her willingness to cooperate could actually benefit me. "Fine," I said at last. "But understand, I'm not doing this on misguided sense of solidarity between us. You were a willing participant in destroying my marriage, and for that you're just as unforgivable in my eyes." Her shoulders slumped in resigned acceptance. "I know. Just tell me what you need from me." As I outlined my requirements for her sworn testimony, I felt an unfamiliar sense of power coursing through me. Not only had I systematically dismantled Rhett's life, but now his own unwitting accomplice was rallying to my cause. The delicious irony wasn't lost on me. By selfishly pursuing her affair with my husband, Tessa had sealed her own terrible fate. Alone, disgraced, and reduced to a pawn in my quest to annihilate the man who had exploited us both. For once, the universe seemed to be restoring balance and serving up a deserving dose of karma. As for me, I was merely the instrument of its ruthless justice, and I had no plans of showing an ounce of mercy. With Tessa's cooperation secured, the final phase of my intricate revenge scheme against Rhett could commence. Elliot wasted no time leveraging her sworn testimony, along with the mountain of evidence we had amassed, to ruthlessly dismantle what remained of Rhett's tattered life. First, we ensured a scathing expose was published in the local newspaper, detailing the full extent of his marital indiscretions and financial improprieties. The sordid story, complete with quotes from Tessa corroborating his unfaithful ways, detonated like a PR nuclear bomb, utterly obliterating any last vestiges of Rhett's professional reputation. "How could you let this happen?" He seethed at me during one of our obligatory legal meetings. His eyes, once so full of arrogant charm, were now sunken with defeat. "You've destroyed my entire career, my standing in this community." I simply shrugged, unbothered by his pathetic self-pity. "I'm just being a concerned citizen, Rhett. The public has a right to know about the sort of man you truly are, a liar, a cheat, a thief with no regard for anyone but his own selfish cravings." His jaw clenched, but I could see the fight had already left him. Once a formidable force to be reckoned with, he was now little more than a shattered, impotent husk of a man. With his limp protests batted aside, Elliot and I proceeded to negotiate a comprehensive divorce settlement, one that ensured I would receive the lion's share of our assets, spousal support, and even punitive damages for the emotional trauma I had endured. "Take it or leave it," I stated flatly as I slid the exorbitant settlement figures across the table. "This is your one opportunity to avoid having every last salacious detail of your affairs plastered across the national media." Rhett's eyes went wide as he grasped the severity of my ultimatum, but we both knew his options were exhausted. He was utterly disgraced, his professional prospects in tatters. All that remained was the choice of how completely I would obliterate him. Begrudgingly, he accepted the terms, his signature on the dotted line representing the ultimate, humiliating concession of defeat. I watched impassively as the once mighty Rhett Lancaster had his entire world redistributed and his future irrevocably altered, all by the hands of the wife he had so carelessly discarded. In that moment, as the stark reality descended upon his crumpled features, I felt something shift inside me. The all-consuming rage that had sustained me, that thirst for vengeance against his transgressions. It was finally being quenched, leaving me surprisingly empty rather than victorious. Perhaps that was the ultimate comeuppance. not just watching him lose everything as punishment, but ensuring he was burdened with the knowledge that his selfish actions had provoked the devastation of his own making. A life in hurt, once so bright and privileged, smothered by the dark consequences born of his bottomless greed and infidelity. As for me, I found myself surprisingly untouched by gloating or glee, despite the cathartic implosion of Rhett's world. My motives had been just, but the process had ultimately hardened me in ways I didn't yet fully grasp. In the end, the true revelation was simply this. We both lost ourselves somewhere along the way, and the paths that once seemed so promising had devolved into intractable darkness. There were no true winners, only the wreckage we had wrought together. The aftermath was a blur. One moment I was standing triumphant in the ashes of Rhett's ruined life. The next, I found myself adrift, unmoored by the process of exacting my intricate revenge. Where did I go from here? The divorce settlement had secured my financial independence, that much was certain. But the road ahead was murky, my identity unraveled by the all-consuming quest to dismantle the man who had so callously discarded me. In those first few weeks of supposed liberation, I floated aimlessly. Wealthy but hollow, unshackled yet burdened by the scars of betrayal that still throbbed fresh. I fantasized about leaving it all behind, this city, these haunting memories. Start anew somewhere far away, where the sting of Rhett's transgressions couldn't reach me. But slowly, painfully, the haze began to lift. Elliot's counsel proved invaluable as I waded through the legalities and set my next chapter. More importantly, a new conviction took root within me, born from the deep empathy for others who had suffered similar deceptions. My experience, as excruciating as it was, could be refocused as a unique source of wisdom, a harsh life lesson in the insidious ways relationships could be tainted by greed, entitlement, and selfish impulses. I had been a victim once, but my path to vengeance had remolded me into a formidable voice of caution. It started small at first. Consultations with other women looking to protect themselves amid looming separations or divorces. I schooled them on financial security, documenting assets, negotiating favorable settlements, but our talks inevitably wandered into those murkier territories of denial, emotional turmoil, shattered self-worth. These were traumas I knew all too intimately, and I found immense purpose in guiding others through the storm I had so recently weathered. My hardships became their lifeline, and with each new client, a little more of my borrowed strength was restored. Before long, the demands for my services snowballed into a fully fledged consulting practice, my life's unexpected new direction. I became a beacon for women determined to navigate the choppy waters of relationships gone awry, equipped with the tools to protect their rights and economic futures. The first time I hosted a group workshop, I was overcome by the sheer resiliency of the women in attendance. Battered yet transcendent souls, each united by dreams of reclaiming their autonomy and self-respect. In their fierce determination, I saw shards of my own reflected journey, rebirth after utter desolation. As I commanded the seminar, imparting the hard-won lessons from my own tribulations, an odd sense of clarity washed over me. This was my new purpose, my personal form of recompense, not just for Rhett's sins, but for all the injustices waged against women by the undisciplined impulses of selfish men. No longer would I be the victim, nor the seething avenger. My role now was that of the mentor, the advocate, the bulwark against deception and exploitation in its myriad forms. Each client conversation, each workshop attendance, they all represented one more battle won against the insidious forces that had once threatened to extinguish my spirit. As the newly forged circle of fierce survivors embraced me that day, I realized I had finally emerged from the shadow cast by Rhett's betrayal. Like the mythical phoenix, I had risen from the scorched remnants of my former life, boldly embracing a new existence of boundless possibilities. And this time, my power was fueled by something more potent than hatred. It was fortified by the profound bonds of resilience, truth, and the unbending determination to never again be broken.